Hey everybody, welcome back. So this is going to be episode 2, and of course I am still here with our very special guest Amanda Sullivan and
Hi,
dear
y'all.
friend. So today's video we are going to be talking about emotional plead. So we're going to be discussing a bunch of stuff that happened after I moved from Oklahoma City back to Tulsa, and then we're going to get more and more in depth into stuff. So you had asked me in the last video what had happened after I moved back from Tulsa or Oklahoma City,
Right,
right?
yeah.
So, I mean, let's say, for 18 months, she had him for 18 months, right? So, like, he was 3 months old whenever I last saw him, and then he was one turning two when I got him back, right? And that was in August. But anyways, we'll get
Yeah,
closer to
so it
that.
had been almost 18 months
Yeah.
since she took him by the time you finally got to see him again. But a lot happened in between.
Yeah, a mass amount of stuff happened in between.
Between those times, let's dive in.
So, literally, my family came up with this term that really described exactly what we were all feeling, right? Which was, it felt like you were experiencing the death of a family member. So nothing. I have felt the loss of a family member, but not anything compared to the loss of a child. But also, especially the loss of a child that you know is still alive, but you have no way of seeing them, talking to them, communicating with them, or anything. Doors.
You don't know if he's safe. You don't know anything.
No, I don't know
Not only can you
anything.
not love on him, but you don't know his well-being, his state of well-being.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So, literally for 18 months, you know, and I know because Jillian and Jasmine, which they'll be in a later on episode that's coming up, with Jillian, she can definitely speak on her experience as far as like watching me go through the motions. For me, it was, at this time, I didn't have my car, right? So at some point, I did get my car back in the middle of these 18 months. However, I didn't have my car, so my grandmother was letting me drive her car. So because of the emotional state that I was in, not being able to sleep, trying to work a job, trying to basically, it was like I'm trying to run away from the emotions, but don't know yet how to digest the emotions because there's no relief. It's like taking like a can of soda, and it's like every time you wake up, if you can go to sleep, you're constantly being shaken all the time. And then you explode 3 or 4 or 5 times, even like more than that, every single day. So it's a constant battle with your emotions. So like for me, I'm sitting and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, my fears is that either one, something bad has happened to both her and my son, or she has left the state, or there's just, literally, it's like the same question over and over again every day. It's like, why? Because if you know that you've never done anything wrong other than work a job, pay for everything, take care of her and the child, you do all the stuff that you're supposed to do, what is the reason? What is this the significant reason for this behavior, this action that has been taking place? So in my head, every day for 18 months, it is a constant wonder. So, during this time, it was like I was prescribed anti-anxiety pills, depression pills, sleeping medication. Jillian, of course, she'd be like, well, look, let's go out, have a couple of drinks or whatever. And, being a drag entertainer for years, I was accustomed to going out to LGBT clubs, performing and having a couple of drinks. But because of what was going on, it was kind of like, imagine like a midlife crisis, but in a different scenario. So it's like, for me, instead of just having 1 or 2 drinks, it was like 6 or 7 shots. Like I went through a really bad phase and then got myself back out of it. But I was going through this because of what was going on. But also showing up to my friend's house at like 10, 12, 1 a.m. in the morning because I can't sleep and I need somebody to talk to. But it was like being on the phone just felt not real. Like I needed physical interaction because that's what I was missing with my child. So it was like I need somebody in front of me, like talking, you know? So at some point it all became word vomit. But then I also thought about it as like almost like counseling, like therapy, right? It's like as those 18 months went by, I started realizing how much more I was the victim and that my son is the victim. Like I started picking up on that where it was like, you know, this happened, okay. And it was like suddenly the fog had finally lifted. And I was just like, well, I now know that I'm not that person. Because when you're with somebody that has like narcissistic like tendencies, your world gets broken down. They rebuild you in the manner that they want you to, so that way they can keep you captive, right?
Okay.
So for me, I felt like I didn't know who I was anymore. I wasn't transitioning.
Right.
I wasn't making videos anymore. I was doing things that I thought that I liked, but wasn't who I was. So it was like I had to find myself all over again. So for those 18 months, like I did find myself again, but I wasn't truly myself, mainly because when I hired an attorney that we will leave unnamed because
just call him lackluster.
literally, you know, this person was just like, okay, well, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And it was like, oh, okay. So, you know, it gave me a sense of comfort to know like, hey, I'm going to get my kid back because this person is making me believe that they know what they're doing. But then I also was thinking to myself, you know what? My son's mom did the same thing too, telling me everything that I wanted to hear, telling me all this stuff to get me roped in.
It's like you're being abused all over again by the legal system and the attorney that you're paying have a lot of money to
and then
help you.
The other
false
side
promises
to it,
and gaslighting and all kinds of things.
And then the other side to it too is that as somebody that identifies as she, her, they, them, and then to be placed in the legal system in a role that you don't feel like you're in, like it would be like placing a cisgender woman that is a mom that goes by the pronouns of a woman and knows herself as a mother to her children, placing her in the role of a man by calling her father, dad, him, he, you know, all this stuff. So I felt like I was so basically being put in like gender roles that I didn't want to be in, because during those months before court, I had figured out who I was after losing my identity, right? So then the attorney that I had telling me the legal system isn't going to give sole physical custody to a trans person. Like, you remember me telling you that?
Oh.
Yeah, because at that time, the only form of hair that I had was basically a man bun, but whenever I let it down, it looked like an asymmetrical bob. So it was still feminine.
Okay.
And then I ended up cutting my hair to what it is now because that attorney was like, you need to present. Yeah. I was just like...
Everybody was just boxing you in.
That's how it felt.
Yeah. Well, in essence, that was what was happening.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go on and mention, you know, from a legal perspective, just for your viewers, that in the state of Oklahoma, it's good to know, you know, when you're having a child with someone, that there are certain laws that protect mother's rights, or the rights of the biological mother over the biological father when the parties or the parents are not married. So if you're having a child with someone and you're not married, as the biological father, you need to make sure to have some sort of legal paternity order in place to protect your rights at the time of birth, really.
Yeah, and that's specific for Oklahoma, not...
That's just for Oklahoma. Yeah. I'm not aware of the other state laws, but just so you know that it is something. It does shock a lot of people once it becomes an issue, because in the beginning you're like, oh, we have this beautiful baby, and then things start going downhill.
So,
and
I mean, no, it was a complete shock to me because, I'm like, calling the cops, trying to get information. So this is, shortly right after the incident had occurred, and then finding out that I have nothing.
Right. And so you have to bring a legal action, to establish, you have to go through the loops of establishing your paternity, and then going after and establishing some sort of custody arrangement, which usually if you're in that situation, there's not going to be an agreement.
Well, and I mean, that's like, so the protective order, right? So, for a couple of months, like, she was gone, my kid was gone, my car's gone. We have no idea, period, where she's at. My mom, being the person that went to school for paralegal work, she knows of a website that you can use here in Oklahoma to look up court cases and stuff. I won't be releasing that website on here though. However, she looked it up on there and she was like, oh, there was something that was filed on February 14th, Valentine's Day. And it was a protective order. So in my head, I knew what protective orders were. I've heard of friends going through it and stuff. And I was just like, are we serious? Like, so, I call my old attorney's paralegal at that time. And I'm like, okay, so I haven't been served. I haven't been notified of this. The court date isn't literally like a week. And I haven't had any service, period. And his best advice was like, well, then you need to go down to the Tulsa courthouse and you need to be willfully served. And I was like, okay. And then he tells me, he's like, because if you don't, and she shows up to court, it could be granted in her favor anyways. And I was like, okay, cool. So I went with my cousin David, and we went down there to the courthouse, and we were in there, and I was just like, hey, I'm here to be willfully served.
And this was the first. Oh, so this is before the hearing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, like, we we go down to the courthouse, and like the police officer's sitting there, and he's just like, oh, hey, how can I help you? And I told him, I was like, this is my name. I'm here to be willfully served. And he was like, okay, like served what? And I was like, a PR, protective order. And he was like, oh, okay, give me a second. So he had to go get the sheriff. And then the sheriff comes out there and is just like, here you go, you've been served. And I was just like, well, that was nonchalant. Like, like it's okay. Yeah. And I remember me and David, we opened it. And it was like, I mean, how many pages are in that document?
I think it was like 4 pages of lies.
Yeah, 4 pages
but
of
the
lies.
Document itself is probably 8 to 10 pages.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a pretty lengthy document, which is what I'm currently looking for right now so I can reference. So I mean, it's a pretty lengthy document. Now the thing is like, there's the one that the judge put together and stuff. Like this.
Well, what you were served is the she went in and she filed a petition for a protective order. And in that, when you file a petition for a protective order, you have to state the reasons why you should have the emergency protective order granted at that time. And you can usually have that heard on the same day. And what happens is, the judge is it's pro se, which means you're not going to get a chance to defend yourself. And the judge is going to review her testimony and her statements. And then, unless it's just like completely, not warranted, most judges will grant an emergency protective order, because then, the 10 days is what you didn't get served with, but we're willfully served. Here's the hearing on the show cause that this protective order needs to remain in place. And so after you were served, you were given the date for the hearing on the protective order, and you showed up. So
one of the interesting things about this is like, in everything that she had on here, which I'm not going to read everything or allow it to be on the internet, but everything that she put in here, she put times and dates and locations for everything. And a lot of this was just kind of like bull. And so
not true.
But the thing that caught me the most about this was that she listed our son as a person on there that needed protection. And she failed to tell them that I was the father or that my name was on the birth certificate. And in fact, if you remember the text message where she had told me that her and her mom had my name removed from the birth certificate, which is not legal to do. And so I was under the impression like, oh, okay, well, she had my name removed from the birth certificate. Like, I don't really see how that's done, blah, 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 blah. And I remember my cousin, which is David, he was like, well, my friend works at the health department, so let's call the health department. So we went and we got a copy of the birth certificate. Lo and behold, there's my name. So, in this, like, she listed a whole bunch of stuff. And one of it is like accusing me of being a cannibal, like me threatening to eat her and our son's cheeks with fava beans, which is straight out of Hannibal Lecter. Right? The other one was accusing me of intentionally wrecking a car because of anger, which is not true because I showed video evidence in court showing that I stayed with the vehicle because she accused me of forcing her mom to ride in the trunk of her own vehicle. But I was with the car at the time that it was towed and went with the tow truck guy to go put brand new tires on it. But I also swerved out of the way of a vehicle that was going to sideswipe me because her and Malachi was in the back seat and I didn't want them to get hit. So I swerved and ended up hitting the curb and broke and busted both of the tires on the driver's side. And so the judge was just like, okay, that makes sense. Okay, so you were with the vehicle. So like, and I went through and I looked at all the times and the dates for everything. And I immediately went through like our messenger, typed in the date. I went on to my photos, typed in the date, and was like, okay, this is what we were doing at this time and day. This is what we were doing at this time. This is what we were talking about. This. So everything that she had time and dated, I was like, no. This is what we were doing at this time, at that time, on that day that she is saying that this happened.
Well, and so I'm wondering, she had been at the woman's shelter for a couple of weeks at this point before she filed that. So there may have been people there saying you need to be very specific about what you're putting in your protective order, which is the reason why she got the protective order, right? Was to stay at the women's shelter. Yeah,
and I mean, because of the women's shelter, it's like she only had an availability to stay there for 30 days.
Yeah.
So if you look at the timeline, it's like January 26th is when she left. February 14th is whenever she filed the protective order. So then they gave her leeway to stay longer, but had to hear the protective order. And if it was granted, she got 6 months to a year. So my thing going in and representing myself was like, it's crazy because I remember walking into the courtroom and I had a folder, a manila folder, and I took everything and I printed everything off and I stapled it. And then I put down time and date and a reference towards each bit of thing that she was claiming. And so what I did was, she's sitting over here, I'm right here. And on the piece of wood that was like no bigger than this, I'm opening up the manila envelope and I'm laying down everything in order and face down. And I see her out of the corner of my eye. She's watching everything I'm doing. So I immediately see that her legs start shaking, which says that she's getting nervous. Yeah. And I'm like, well, I'm going to look at this from the perspective, I'm here to fight for me. Mm-hmm. And the first thing that I let the judge know was like, Your Honor, she's failing to inform you that my name is on the birth certificate because she was going to claim that I wasn't the parent. And I presented the birth certificate first, and the judge was like, whoa. You guys have a kid together?
Yeah, because she falsified. Yeah. There's a place on the that petition to check whether or not you guys share a biological child, and she failed to acknowledge that.
Exactly. And so that was the first thing that I presented. And it just went on from there. It snowballed into such a thing that like the judge discovered that she was breastfeeding while drinking. I mean,
the whole thing.
The whole thing.
So the judge gave her, I think he gave a 30-day, like basically, he didn't grant the protective order for the 6 months or the year. It was, and most of the time they will, if they think that it's necessary, it'll be 6 months at a minimum. But in this case, he was just like, you guys have some things to work out. You have a child together. I'm going to grant this 30-day so that you can,
Well, too, like, I had brought up, I was like, no. So me and my attorney are getting ready to file for paternity and custody. And I remember the judge was just like, do you have that? Did you file today? Did you file today? And I was like, no. I'm filing in Oklahoma City County. And he was like, okay. And I was like, so he already knew that this was going to a case. Like he knew that something was wrong because every person that was there, my grandmother, my mom, Jillian, David, they all got to talk. And we all presented our own physical truth and evidence. And in the meantime, I'm also hearing from the other side, like, well, he, she, like all this stuff back and forth. And the judge ended up stopping them and then looked at me and was like, what is your pronouns? And at that moment, I didn't really think about it. So I was just like, I'll go be he, him, he, him, da, da, da. And he was just like, okay. And then it looks over them and is like, okay, figure out your pronouns because he just told you. And I'm just like, well, that's just the way that it's going to be right now. Because I'm actively, my old attorney had told me,
right,
you're going to have to present this.
That was the way that you needed to move forward through the legal system as he, him. Okay, well, so after, she was allowed to stay there for another 30 days. So the judge granted the 30-day protective order. And at that protective order hearing, the mother of your child was made aware that you are about to file the petition to establish paternity in Oklahoma County.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, she was allowed to stay at the women's shelter for 30 days. You left, consulted with your attorney at the time, and you guys started trying to track her down to serve her with this petition to establish paternity. You want to go into that saga?
So, I mean, little bit of backtrack, right? So it's like when we had that protective order hearing, I remembered because David and my mom and my grandmother was just like, you had everybody in the courtroom, like literally like supporting you because like the way you were presenting yourself to the judge, you were talking fluently, you were on point, you were presenting your evidence first, you were letting your evidence speak for itself, and you gave no narrative other than and there was people in the courtroom that was like, he should be an attorney.
Oh yeah.
And everything. And I remember walking out of there, and I remember hearing the judge be like, okay, I'm granting this for a 30-day cooling off period. And it felt like to me like I had lost,
right.
But then at the same time I was like, well, it could be worse. It could be 6 months to a year, or nothing at all, and then things get worse because she'll leave and go somewhere else. But then I also remember thinking to myself too, like, I just vindicated myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like
well, and I think the judge realized that because you told him that you were about to start pursuing it legally on another route, that he felt like it would have been, taken care of through those means, and that he was just able to give a little bit of space.
Yep.
So you didn't you didn't lose. And I think that if you hadn't said that you were about to go file for paternity in Oklahoma County, he may not have granted it at all. I think that he thought it was going to be taken care of because she was standing there listening to you tell her that she was about to be served with the petition.
Well, I think that's what he was wanting me to do was to go ahead.
You already had it arranged.
Yeah, I already had everything arranged. The only difficulty was it was like the attorney at that time was just like so slow.
Yeah, I have lots of comments about that.
I know.
Like it would have been ideal for you to be able to serve her at that protective order hearing with the petition, because that would have put the clock starting on her deadlines, and you would have that's a whole nother.
There's a whole
that's check one on the lackluster performance of your previous attorney.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
Okay, so but you eventually, I think, filed for paternity. Was it like March or April? Maybe even the end of February. I don't remember. But then, okay, so your attorney then filed a petition to establish paternity in March of 2020.
10th. Yep.
And what happened after that?
So we filed all that stuff, right? The motion to enter, the paternity, custody, and visitation. We filed all that stuff. And then we also filed petitioner's motion for drug testing, petitioner's motion for psychological evaluation, which we did end up getting. So we got all that stuff. However, we're going to go into more detail in the next video. So you'll probably notice some like stop goes in this. My apologies for that. So it's technical difficulties with some of the devices. So we're going to come back in the next episode. We're going to talk about further on with the court case and other things that happened. And of course, Mandy will be our special guest for that. She will be here for the majority of the videos, helping me tell my story and going through all the legal steps of everything. So anyways, I love you all. Have a very heavenly day. And we will see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.